What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be working on installing some gauges in the car. I have an oil temp, a water temp, and oil pressure gauge. It's some Defi gauges. When I bought these came in Defi boxes, but one of my friends told me these might be replicas. But either way, they still work. So we're going to install these. So a while back, I traded my stock bezel for one that takes gauges, and I already dremeled these out because the stock holes in the bezel are 52 millimeter, and these gauges are 60. So I had to take a good amount out. So I just have these gauges sitting in here; they're not wired up. So I'm going to move this water temp one to this side and put the oil temp one over here. And then I was looking at doing the other one right in this area here. So basically what I'm going to have to do is probably take the steering wheel off, the surround, and probably the switch so I can get the Dremel in here, because I'm going to have to open this up quite a bit for this to fit in there. But it should look pretty good when it's all said and done. So let's get started. It took a little bit, but I finally got the hole cut out big enough for the gauge to go in. It's super messy in here now. You can see all the plastic. So be sure to be prepared to vacuum your car if you do this. But that's pretty much how big the hole had to get opened up. And this fits in there pretty tight. So I'm not worried about that coming out. So right now I'm gonna take off the top two screws from the bezel, pull the bezel out. I'm gonna pull this out because I did leave the wiring for the radio in here. So here's the stereo connector, the adapter where you would usually hook up aftermarket radio. But as you can see, I stripped out all the wires except for the constant power, the 12 volt switch power, and the ground when I redid my dash harness. So I have this plugged in here, have it going ground to the black wire, and the switch 12 volt is the red wire. I have that coming up to here, ground, and then I have the other three wires tied together because I don't care if it illuminates during the day. So basically here's the gauge. I'll give it some power. So the best thing about these gauges are you can daisy chain them together, so you don't have to run 3 separate power wires. It came with like these little jumpers right here, so this would plug in right here and go to the next gauge. But these aren't going to be long enough, so I'm going to have to extend these, because one gauge will go here and then it could daisy chain up to the one that's here. But just in case I ever want to pull the gauge out, I want to have enough length, because they got this button on the back where you can set alarm set points, and the gauge will start beeping if you pass that set point. So I'm going to extend these. So I'll have this gauge right here, the oil pressure, going directly to the radio connector. And then from here, I'll have it daisy chained up to this one, and then daisy chained from this one underneath the bezel to this gauge here. But I'll make enough length for I can pull the gauge out if I have to. Or if I take the bezel out, it's not going to pull any of the wires. So how I have this wired up is, I showed you earlier how the connector, how I have that cut up on the radio. So I put a terminal strip right here and double-sided tape to the inside of the console. I have the power wire to the gauge, all 3 leads tied into one wire, and that comes over, goes to the first gauge where the dimmer switch was. And on the bottom I have the power in the back. Right here I have the constant 12 volt just in case I ever need that in the future, but that's just by itself. and all the way on the end, these are the grounds. So this comes up this way through here into this gauge. Then I have this wire here that daisy chains up to here, and on the console I have the wire that goes here. I have it taped off here, comes out here. So that's just for the power. So I'm gonna power up all the gauges and let you see what that looks like, and then we'll move on to actually getting the signal. So the powers ran to all the gauges now, so I'm going to show you that everything's working. Alright, so now we're going to move along to getting the signal to the oil temp and the oil pressure, and I'll show you exactly how we're going to do that. Moving along to get these oil gauges hooked up. Have this sandwich plate here. It's nothing fancy. I think it's just the eBay one. I had this on my old car. So basically, you have the temperature sensor here. I have the ground wire underneath the sensor, and then the signal over top like this. Same for the oil pressure sensor. This is the positive, and the negative is right here underneath the sensor, sandwiched in between the plate and the sensor. So I'm going to drain the oil right now, and once that's drained and I get the oil filter off, I'll show you how to install the sandwich plate. So once you remove the oil filter from the block, you'll see this little thing sticking out. The oil filter screws onto this, and then these threads are in the block. I basically just took these channel locks and twisted it out. That's pretty much the only way to get it out, because the sandwich plate that I have actually screws into the block. There's some other ones that screw over this, but that's not the type that I have. Now that the sandwich plate is installed and the oil filter, I'm going to end up feeding it right through the heater core hole right there on the firewall, since there's nothing there and it's the most direct route to go inside the car. There's the wire coming through the firewall. I just have these push connectors. I'm going to shrink wrap each one. I just want to make sure all the gauges were hooked up properly. So they run through the back here and up here to this one and this one. So they're working. I did just take a ride around the block. So now I'm going to work on the water temp gauge. For the coolant temperature sensor, I removed the upper radiator hose outlet, drilled I think a 5/16 hole, and then I tapped it with 1/8 inch NPT, and then I ran the wiring back through here, and then straight into the heater core hole. I didn't really film the process because I'm running late for work a little bit, but that's all done. The coolant's rebled. Alright guys, so I'm editing this video on my lunch break and I realize there's no outro. I'm not 100% sure if I was in a rush in the last clip and I forgot to hit record, or I just didn't film an outro at all. But there's no performance benefit to adding gauges. Some people think they look cool, but I did it so I can monitor the engine temperatures and the oil pressure. I usually beat up on this car pretty hard when I do drive it, which isn't very often, but I want to know what's going on with the engine when I am driving it. It's pretty straightforward installation. Just make sure you put the sensors where they should go at and wire everything up. Make sure you don't have any leaks once you put the fluid back in the car. But if you have any questions or need any advice, just feel free to leave it in the bottom and I'll get back to you. But until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.